Hello everyone, and welcome back to AP Bio with AP Playground. If you want some more background on chemistry for this lesson, we have a video to help with that, 1.0. But today, we will be covering topic 1.2, the elements of life. Main objectives of this lesson is to be able to understand the movement of energy and atoms between organisms within the environment to build macromolecules, including carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids, as well as the power of carbon within building these macromolecules. College Board wants you to be able to model this or recognize and use a model of this through suggested scale 2A visual representations, describe characteristics of a biological concept, process, or model represented visually. So, the major elements of life are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur, otherwise known as CHOMP and S. And the CHON portion, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, makes up 96% of our bodies. And these elements are called essential elements because they're essential to our survival. Now, compounds which contain carbon are called organic compounds and can also be known as living compounds because all life on Earth is carbon-based. Most compounds with carbon also contain hydrogen, and this is most commonly seen in what's called a hydrocarbon chain, where you simply have a chain of carbon atoms connected like so, and then you just have hydrogen atoms attached all around these carbon atoms. Now, the four major macromolecules are made out of these essential elements, CHOMP. And a macromolecule is just a large molecule, while a micromolecule would be a small molecule. And the four biological macromolecules are called so because they are essential to life. I'm sure you've heard some of these. They encompass carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. And a large portion of this unit will be spent focusing on their composition and their function. So let's take a look at why carbon is so important. Carbon is in group 14 on the periodic table, meaning it has a valence of 4, or 4 electrons in the outermost electron shell. Now a group is just a column on the periodic table, so over here we have group 1, group 2, group 3, and so forth, but if we're looking for valence, we have to disregard this middle section and continue to here, where this group would have a valence of 3, and this group where carbon is would have a valence of 4. And this means it can form 4 covalent bonds or share an electron with 4 other atoms because you can hold up to 8 electrons in the outermost electron shell. These bonds can be single, double, or triple, meaning carbon can bind to 4 other atoms, each one with a single bond, or 3 where one is sharing 2 electrons and it's a double bond. And of course, as you increase the amount of bonds between 2 atoms, it's going to get stronger and stronger. This allows carbon to form large molecules by connecting to other carbon compounds, such as if you have 2 carbon molecules here, and each one is single bound to some hydrogen atoms. These 2 carbon atoms can bind to each other through a covalent bond, combining and essentially making a carbon compound. And through this process, we can form all of life and create really large molecules. Now, the properties of a molecule don't just depend on the carbon backbone. They also depend on different different compounds attached to it, known as functional groups, which provide different properties, such as turning the organic molecule into an acid, into a base, making it polar or nonpolar. Now, there are a few functional groups that are really helpful to know for this course, so we're just going to go over them. The first is a hydroxyl group, and that's just an oxygen attached to a hydrogen. Now, what this R means is the rest of the molecule. You'll often see R used to refer to a side chain. And this is polar because oxygen is electronegative, so the hydrogen is going to have a partial positive charge. Methyl is just the side chain attached to a carbon with 3 hydrogens around it. Carbon is not very electronegative, so it's a nonpolar functional group. Next we have carbonyl, and there are 2 types of carbonyl groups, and this is what's called a ketone right here, where it's an oxygen double bound to a carbon between two side groups. Also polar because it's got that oxygen there, but you can also have what's called an aldehyde if you look down here, where there is no second side group and it just ends in a hydrogen. So in the middle of a compound you'll find a ketone right here, such as what is shown here, but then at the end of a molecule you'll find aldehyde. And a good way to remember that is aldehyde died at the end of its life. Next, we have a carboxyl, which is very similar to a carbonyl group, except the ending is a hydroxyl group. And this is charged and can release a proton, leaving it with a negatively charged oxygen. So it's considered acidic because it's donating protons. It's lowering the pH. It's making the solution more acidic. An amino group consists of a nitrogen attached to two hydrogens, and it can accept a third hydrogen due to its valence, can accept a proton, and because it's removing protons from the environment, heightening the pH, it's considered a basic molecule. Next, we have a phosphate group, which is just a phosphate attached to 4 oxygen, and it can lose both of these hydrogens as protons, so it's also considered acidic. This we're going to see a lot in nucleic acids. And finally, we have a sulfhydryl group, which is very simple. It's just a sulfur attached to a hydrogen, and it's also polar because sulfur is electronegative. So you can see how these functional groups each have their own properties. And now we're going to take a look at identifying some of them. So this first group right here is an amino acid, and you're not expected to know this yet, but we're going to focus on the side chain, the functional group right here. We can see just a lot of hydrogens connected to carbon, so obviously those are going to be nonpolar. But we also see this, this amino acid right here, and we can see that it's charged. It's accepted a proton, meaning it's both going to be basic because it removed a proton from the environment, and it's also now charged because it's an ion. Over here, we can see a ketone group right in the middle, as well as a lot of hydroxyl groups, and we can assume that this is going to be polar because of all the oxygens involved. Generally, when you see an oxygen, you're looking at something polar. Lastly, over here, another amino acid, but we're still focusing on the side chain. Again, there's just hydrogens around the carbon, but we also see another ketone group as well as an amine group, which we can see will probably accept another hydrogen atom, becoming basic and charged just like this first amino acid over here. The important things to know in topic 1.2 elements of life include CHOMP, our essential elements, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Carbon's 4 valence and its power as a result to create large molecules, namely our 4 major macromolecules, carbs, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids, and then the functional groups which affect the properties of compounds, which we're going to see all over these macromolecules, namely the hydroxyl group, carbonyl, both aldehyde and ketone groups, carboxyl, amino, phosphate, and sulfhydryl groups. Next up is topic 1.3, and we're going to be talking all about our major macromolecules.